the school board out in California that said a lot of naughty words when they shouldn't have. Didn't know they were live.
Yeah, none of us needs that headache.
Boy, that's for sure. Well, we don't say naughty words anyway, so no.
No. That just shows how quick it can happen.
Yeah, welcome Jim Zahns. I see his smiling face. And Bob Bauer probably will not be able to join us tonight. He's out of town and didn't know if he could get his technology to work. It is 4:30 though, so I will call the meeting to order. Let the roll call reflect that Chairman Bartlett could not make it and Bob Bauer might be able to call in, but he's out of town and may have some technical difficulties. First order of business is approval of the minutes from January 25th. Carl moves.
Jim's on seconds.
Jim's on seconds. We got no shortage of seconds. Any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor of approval of the minutes from January say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. I don't think there were any public comments registered. If somebody knows differently, tell me now.
No public comment.
None. Thank you, Krista. Then we'll go to staff reports, and I would like to just emphasize that we don't need to make these staff reports overly long or difficult, but if members of the committee have questions, or if any of the staff has things to add, you're certainly welcome to entertain those. And Josie is going to go first today because she's got a commitment a little later. And she told me that she did have something to add to her report. So Josie, the floor is yours.
Hello. Well, first, I guess I will bring your attention to the written report that I submitted and apologize for the error I made last month. My staff who usually gets into the SAP and runs reports for me was gone, so I tried to do it myself. So that's the reason for the error. But I gave you the wrong figure for what our budget was left for the year. So currently we're at 92.43%, which sounds a little bit better than what I reported last month. Does anybody have any questions about the written report that I submitted before I talk about my add-ons, I guess? No, hearing none.
Don't see any.
Okay. The board approved a month or two ago a resolution to the governor's office. It was an ask to increase the child support program's funding, $4 million in each of the next 2 years. I'm happy to report that ask did make it into the governor's budget last week. So now we just need to see if the legislature keeps it in there. Myself and some of our colleagues, the child support director in Eau Claire, Chippewa, and Clark, and myself had a meeting, a 40-minute Zoom meeting with Senator Bernier last week, and one of her staff persons. She now sits on the budget committee, and so because she serves our counties, we talked about our ask and told her about our program. So hopefully she'll work to keep that in there. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was IT made it possible for us to get secured email encryption email capabilities. Previously, that was only there was some encryption when you're emailing people within our Dunn County network, but if you're emailing anybody outside of the, co.dunn email address, it wasn't secured. And we received some guidance from the state that said that if anything we ever sent got compromised in any way, that we'd be on the hook to be providing like a year's worth of credit monitoring and whatnot for people. So this wasn't a budgeted item for 2021. But the cost for me to get a license, it was like $75. So I have those capabilities now, and I'm asking my staff to, if they have to send an email with personal identifying information in it, that they route it through me. And then in the 2022 budget, I'll work to try to get everybody those capabilities. So
Josie, now the $75, is that the total cost for the whole office staff for a year, or what are we
just
talking
for
about?
me,
Just for one person?
just for me. Yep.
Okay,
So because
So-
it wasn't an item that we had budgeted for, I can come up with $75, but I wasn't gonna be able to do it for everybody, so.
one of the things, and Keith Stry is with us, he can chime in if he cares to, but this strikes me as something that might be a candidate for a contingency fund request. First of all, it seems like a fairly important issue, and secondly, it's probably a total of how many staff are we talking about times $75?
Well, and actually that 75 initially included, I think, whatever it costs to get the Virtue is the name of the software or whatever. So there was that initial cost and then the licenses. So for me, for this year, it was 75. I think the license itself was closer to 46 or $50 or something like that.
Chairman Tripp, I can answer at least part of that. This was part of a county-wide initiative. IT had received a number of requests with us having so many people working remote, as well as knowing good business practice for certain areas. This was something that needed to happen. Unfortunately, this did happen after routes to recovery funding took place. Again, we were scrambling to do everything we could to maximize use of those dollars. This came out, unfortunately, after that.
Yeah.
But yes, we are looking at, as we always do, we asked operating departments to see what they could afford to cover. And certainly if there becomes a hardship later in the year, we can consider contingency requests, but certainly you don't do it this early in the year. We have to see how things go, but the main focus was making sure that we have enough protection for county correspondence with so many people working remote and so much more information flowing electronically. So that is something that everybody should be and will be monitoring, and then factoring in their 22 budget requests as well.
Right. Yeah, I hadn't considered it probably has an impact on other departments as well.
It
Correct.
does.
Yeah,
So that was it. Those were the two things I wanted to add on.
great. Thank you, Josie. Anybody have any questions? Don't see any, then thank you, Josie, and
All
you're
right.
free to go.
Thank you much. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, Josie, before
Oh,
you
yeah.
go,
Mhm.
one last thing. Would you send me a real quick email with was it $4 million ask in the budget?
It was in the governor's biennium budget. We were asking for $4 million in 2022 and 2023
For specifically?
for the Wisconsin Child Support Enforcement Program. So that, we don't get 4 million, but it'll get divvied amongst
Right.
the 72 counties and tribes, however they do it.
If you would please send me a real quick email with those
Mhm.
basic facts, I'm going to add that to my legislative report tonight at the meeting.
Sure.
Okay,
Okay. Sounds good.
thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Anything else for Josie? All right, thank you, Josie.
Yep.
And emergency management, 911. Any questions for Melissa? Melissa, do you have anything to add to your report?
Nope, not really. Just what was on my written report.
Okey doke. And I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Great. Medical examiner, Marcy, how about you? Anything to add to your report, or do any of the committee members have a question?
I do not have anything to add to my report.
Great. Questions? Nope. Sheriff's Department, sheriff has a few carryover things, but other than that, yeah, I thought you were going to be gone at a meeting this week.
I leave tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I'll be gone for the CJCC meetings
Okay.
later this week. The only thing I need to add, of course, in my world, a lot can change in a week. By the time I send this out, we've got 4 additional cases of COVID in the jail with inmates. We've got some potential with employees that we're waiting on testing for, but my jail staff's handling that well and you know, keeping people isolated and stuff. But we thought we were out of the woods with the inmates, but I believe it was on Friday, 2 tested positive, and then over the weekend an additional 2 tested positive. So other than that, yeah, I don't have much more to add from my written report.
Questions for the sheriff? I have a question about your email terrorism.
Yeah. I counted the other day on the chicken toss. I believe the DA board member, Brian Johnson, and I are all receiving. I counted the other day, the 17th, I had 128 emails from the chicken protesters, and the same amount on the 16th, I believe. So they're trying to terrorize me by email, but I have them going to spam now. So at least they're not clogging up my inbox.
I wish those people in Ridgeland would just quit flying those chickens. Carl, I saw your hand up. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, what's this about?
It's Pioneer Days in Ridgeland has gone on for about 40 years. And they do a greased pig contest. They release a pig and they have kids and women can capture these pigs and take them home. And then they do a chicken fly off the roof of one of the buildings. It's actually about 10 feet high. And believe it or not, chickens do fly. They don't drop to the ground like a lead balloon, like some people want to believe they do. And so they fly out over the crowd, and whoever catches a chicken gets to take it home. And there's protesters from around the country, well, around the world, we get emails from, because the DA and Brian Johnson and I have been added to a petition to stop the chicken fly. And so anytime anybody signs that petition, the DA, Brian, and I all get emails from whoever signed that. And it's a scripted email that basically comes from their email address. Along with that, they do a horse-drawn parade, and they do cross-cut competition and things like that for Pioneer Days. And it was last Saturday.
Oh, it was last Saturday.
It was last Saturday. Yep.
Oh.
The 20th, it went off without a hitch, no issues, but the protesters, I can't remember the name of the group that predominantly focuses on that, decided not to come to Ridgeland and protest this year because of COVID and the large crowd that gathers for that. So, but I'm guessing they'll be back up there next year and requesting a safe protest location as they have in the past years.
Any other questions? Sheriff, I did have one other thing, and that's the getting rid of your eligibility list. You need the committee to act on that?
Yeah, our last eligibility list, we only had 2 people on. We hired one of them, and the other wasn't deemed to be qualified. And and between Marshall and I in HR, we can't figure out exactly when that list was supposed to expire, but formally, we need to request that list to be tossed out so we can move on with the new eligibility list.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I could have looked at my agenda and answered my own question there. But, does that mean that the Civil Service Commission will meet again to interview candidates?
Yep, we'll The application deadline is actually tonight for deputy positions and jail officer, corrections officer positions. And we'll be going through the process to establish a new eligibility list. And so Civil Service Commission will need to meet again and do interviews once we're able to move on with that list and establish a new list. We have a potential, we have all kinds of potential options. Anybody could leave at any time, but I have one deputy that is looking at leaving to pursue a career elsewhere. And he could leave at any time. He's just pending a background check right now. So as shorthanded as we are with work comp injuries and things, we can't afford to be missing people too long. On the corrections side of things, we have staff that's looking at April retirement date. And there again, you know, we lose a couple of staff for 14 days because of a possible COVID exposure. It's awful tough to run short staff there. So we're trying to get an eligibility list going there as well.
Thank you. Brenda, did you have anything to add from the jail?
No, I don't. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for the sheriff? Carl?
Have most of your staff been vaccinated by now?
Due to, I mean, I can't ask them if they've been vaccinated or not. I've gave them the options of where to get vaccinated. I don't know who all has been vaccinated. I gave them the choice and gave them avenues to become vaccinated. I know several people have. I don't know how many out of my staff have been.
What about jail staff? Is there any requirement that they be vaccinated?
No, no requirement at this time. You know, obviously we can't mandate
Right.
vaccinations, so there's nothing that's come through the state or anything that says. That we
Yeah,
have
same
to.
is true of the neighbors actually, which is a little bit surprising, but.
All right.
Okay, I've said this 4 times. So I'm going to say it one more time. Anything else for the sheriff, or are we done with him for a while? We'll get back to you later when the action starts.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Kevin. Courts, Katie, anything for you?
No, I don't actually have anything additional to add than my short written report. I did attach my presentation for the county board meeting next month. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. But otherwise, pretty busy and status quo here.
That's good. Questions for Katie? All right. Don't see the judges anywhere. They must be busy these days.
Yeah, they are.
CJCC. Sarah, how about you? Do you have anything to add to your report?
Good evening. No, nothing additional at this time. I am also slated for the March County Board presentation, so working on that report right now. So I will provide a courtesy copy and be available to answer any questions on the annual report. But just kind of moving ahead this year and 2021.
Any questions for Sarah on CJCC? Thank you. District Attorney, Andrea, you're last today. I saw you trying to hide under your desk before too, so you can't get away with it.
Yeah, it's my heater. I'm always cold.
Not today, you're not cold.
Yeah. I guess my only thing to add is with respect to the budget for the retirement from the victim witness coordinator, my office spoke with finance. I believe there will be a manual to make that occur in 2020. And so that will help my 2021 budget moving forward.
Good. Questions? Don't see any. Thank you to all the staff. Appreciate your time, efforts. I know that your written reports are an important part of the agenda because other supervisors who might not attend the meeting or view it like to read through those. I also like to see this kind of thing in the minutes, so I think we really covered things pretty well. So thank you very much to all of you. Item 6, I don't have anything for the meeting. Item 7, consideration of actions, directional plan recommendations. Bob Colson is with us tonight. There he is, live and in person. He's got his customized headset on. Bob, I'm just going to turn it over to you and go with it where you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is my audio okay?
Yep, you sound good to me.
Yeah. If I could ask you maybe just to give a little bit of background, from executive and what you know about maybe the directional plan, and then I could fill in the gaps if you don't mind.
Sure. How many of you were not on the county board when we developed the directional plan? Mike was not. Carl, you were on the, Bob Bauer, of course, who's not here. Anyway, the directional plan was an effort to set a course for our future activity for the county board. Basically, like any good plan, it starts out with some sort of a vision and a mission statement, and then identifies priorities. And at some level, you want to identify the actions that will be associated with those priorities. And Bob is going to show you the diagram a little later, I think, right, Bob? You've got it.
Yep.
You'll share your screen.
Yep. Yeah, I can share it now if you like.
Why don't you do that? What was developed was a pyramid type of diagram.
Is it up
that
there?
had, yep, thank you.
Okay.
Had some priorities, some goals, some general direction, starting with our vision statement at the top. If you look at the bottom tier, those are the 5 specific initiatives that were agreed to be our initial focus. One of them, you'll notice, initiative number 4 was to develop a criminal justice policy. I think our entire CJCC and all of the related activities surrounding that really goes to that initiative. Like any plan, and I like the wording on this, it's a plan process. Like any plan, if it's going to be useful, it's got to be a living document. It's got to be updated and tweaked and changed occasionally. And that's the process that we're in right now. We'll take a look at this, and if we have suggestions on how to amend, change, add to, delete, we should. This is now our opportunity to do that. And now I'll turn it over to Bob.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the chair stated, this is the directional plan process that was adopted for the county board members to work on. And that means that each committee, because county board members serve on standing committees, that each committee then can be charged with or should be working on something that is moving us towards our vision of provide quality service that protect and empower our citizens in a cost-effective manner. What I want to do is speak specifically to this committee because there were, when we adopted the plan, there were 10 initiatives. Let me just find those so you can see those. There were 10 initiatives that were agreed upon in terms of this is what the county wanted to work on at that time. And so and then they sorted those out, kind of like Harry Potter, put them into the sorting hat, and some of them came to the front, and the develop a legislative but a judicial, or I got to get back up to where criminal justice policy was one of those that the group felt this is important enough that we should put this on the front of the document and start working on that. And so just so we understand how the process works. So any initiative is on the bottom tier. And right now there are 5 initiatives shown on the bottom tier. And you know, and our goal is to move towards the pinnacle, towards proactive government. And so let's just take the criminal justice policy. You know, there's been a lot of work that your group has been working on. And I agree with the chair that a lot of that was the CJCC. And maybe that is the beginnings, or that is, you know, the policy that you guys want to push forward at this time. Doesn't mean that because you do one policy that you can't continue on, because you have both the sheriff working with you, 911, and the courts, and so there may be other policies that are important for your group. But let's just focus on where we're at. So right now, you know, the initiative 4 was develop a criminal justice policy, and the idea behind this directional plan process is that, you know, as you're developing your policy, you want to take into consideration the next tier, that there is a sustainability effort, and sustainability in these terms means, you know, that it's going to be ongoing, that it'll still be beneficial or more beneficial tomorrow as it is today. So it isn't just, you know, the green aspect of sustainability that people talk about. You know, there should be some sort of public engagement component or process, you know, in your policy. Board engagement, the board needs to know just what it is that you're doing. And I'm guessing that's pretty easy, because most policies are probably going to come up to the board. And so I think the board would be engaged, but not just in this policy, but maybe just board engagement about what you're doing in general. And I think this may have been the reason, you know, part of this directional plan may have been when at the county board they started doing committee reports at the county board. It may have been kind of as an offshoot of this, but so board engagement is important in the plan. And then quality of life, you know, does this improve the quality of life for our citizens, you know, and you know, so if this policy engages all those 4 pieces, then we can move it up and say it's proactive government and one step closer to our vision. And then you can take that off of the front, and you can start working on other things that you like to get done. So part of today's discussion is to say, all right, what does that mean to develop a criminal justice policy? And I think you guys are in the best position to kind of work that through. I'm here as a resource to say, well, I could work with 1 or 2 or the committee, depending on what you want to do, and I could be the scribe, and I could put together a policy that would come back for review, and at some point the committee would say thumbs up, and let's run with that, and we'll adopt this as our policy. So my role is to keep you guys focused and working on getting that policy done, and then the other piece is to look at those 10 and see, is there something out? Is there something in there that, and it doesn't have to be related only to your committee. Is there something in that 10 that you're saying, boy, that really needs to be worked on now, or boy, I don't know what that even means, or boy, that really needs to come out of the plan, you know, and maybe we need to add some things. And so as you said, this should be a fluid document, and there has been, believe it or not, there has been some work done on all 10 of these initiatives. What's been missing is next step, just to formulate a policy to move on, and then to look at, well, where do we go from here? So that's kind of a, you know, and there's some definitions in this plan that talks about, you know, what the levels are, and the mission, the values, our mission statement, and then just what each of those quality of life things, there's quality of life, public engagement. So we've defined all of those board engagement sustainability so that you have a basic understanding of what it is that we're trying to get at, but it really is a document that is intended to be worked on, primarily by supervisors, and they would be directing, staff that reports to them to help this out. And then one other thing that I will say, and then we can start the discussion. I think that it would be a valuable tool, I guess you will, or goal to say, maybe every year at February or January, or pick a month. Every year at that time, let's, it's at least once a year we're going to crack this open and see where we're at, see what we've done, assess our progress, and maybe move something in or out of that process. But I think if you don't keep it somewhat fluid or somewhat refreshed in front of your committee, that it will gather some dust. So, and I believe it's a very simple process, and it really relies on communication between the standing committee and their staff to kind of keep them on task in terms of getting at their initiative. So Mr. Chair, does that kind of set the table in terms of maybe what we were talking about at some of the other at executive?
It does, and I've got a few questions, but I'm going to put it to the committee first. If anybody has any reaction, comments, suggestions, questions, this is a good place to start. I don't hear anything. So let me start by posing this question, Bob.
Sure.
Initiative number 4, develop a criminal justice policy. And you've talked about policy, I've used the word. Let's define what we mean by policy. Are we talking about a policy statement with accompanying actions? Are we talking about a general, can you help me out, or does somebody else on the committee? I'm willing to entertain any thoughts on this, because I need to solidify my understanding of just exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know that when the planning group that put this together, and then all of the people that participated in getting this thing done, I don't know that, develop a criminal justice policy. I don't know that meant that it had to be, a policy that is adopted by the county board. And is that formalized? I think it needs to be a policy is pretty much, this is what we're going to, this is how we're going to do this, and what we're going to do, kind of a definition of a policy.
So then I read that to mean we should start with a statement.
Yes.
And then obviously, if it's going to go anywhere beyond that, then we need to identify activities that will support, promote, enlarge, advance that statement purpose.
Yeah, generally that's that is a policy, and then whether it's just an internal policy or whether it's a policy that gets run up and is adopted by the county, that would be the committee's decision.
Yeah, Carl, go ahead.
It's always seemed to me that something like this, I mean, isn't the CJCC pretty much already doing this? And if they come up with a broader policy change that they think needs to be made, wouldn't they, out of the nature of their organization, bring this to us?
So this
Sarah,
is Sarah.
yeah, go ahead.
This is Sarah Benedict, and I apologize for being on the phone. We've got a hockey practice tonight. Hockey team's going to state, which is great for the Menominee area. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I think the CJCC is that arm of the county board that can help set policy, explore policies, and recommend those. We do have connections with the county board, with the county board chair and the Judiciary and Law Committee chair as permanent members. And, you know, a little historical perspective, I think this directional plan was important when we were perhaps just getting started and we were reworking and rebalancing, and the direction, us being part of the directional plan, I think helped move us to continue those efforts in sustainability and regroup with the former county board chair, Steve Rasmussen. So I think it's been very helpful for us to have the platform and the visibility of the county board by being part of the directional plan. And that's also helped us, you know, focus on our goals and activities. But I think I'll just stop there at this point.
Did that answer your question, Carl?
Yeah, I can see how when you begin an organization like that, I mean, before there was CJCC, I assume that the members of it operated somewhat independently, and that they recognized that in order to deal with a lot of the justice issues, they needed to get together and talk about these things and find a more connected approach to them. And you know, and I think bringing about something like that is a good reason to occasionally talk about broader goals and how they might be accomplished. But I think further proposals related to criminal justice policy ought to start with that group and not with our committee.
Bob, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so Sarah's exactly right. I mean, back when this directional plan was being finalized and the ink was drying, CJCC was, you know, and I apologize because I don't know all of the ins and outs of this, but CJCC was just coming onto the scene, and there was a lot of interest by Steve Rasmussen to either formalize it or to make sure that group or that organization or that part of the county government could grow and be sustainable. And I think it has, you know, just from hearing what Sarah was saying and from what I know about it. I think what was missing is just, you know, the policy that says, you know, this is CJCC, this is what we do, this is what we're all about, this is where we're headed, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's the kind of discussion or language that I think is important for the directional plan. I think if you go back and you historically look at where that idea started and where it is right now, it's really blossomed, and I think that you may be able to go back and just write. It still needs to have a policy statement because it's not going away, but where's it headed from here? And so I think that may be a really good place to start, because this is really what kind of brought this to the forefront was the CJCC when this plan was being adopted. So I think a policy about that, a statement, or, you know, some discussion about that is probably worthwhile.
If any of the committee members have comments, you'll have to speak up. I've only got a few people on the screen at once here, so I don't see everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I don't know the extent right now to which we have a criminal justice policy. I think Sarah could answer that much better, but I'm not sure what work remains to be done if we don't have that.
Sarah, you
So
want to?
Yes, I guess I would say that we have a criminal justice mission statement that we work off of in our efforts to collaborate. and that is to be more effective and efficient with our criminal justice system across the board. That was worked through in a strategic plan to be to really retool our purpose statement. So that was several years ago that we did that. And it was less prescriptive. We wanted to be really focused on evidence-based, collaborative, efficient, effective overall as a general mission statement. And then we have our executive of the CJCC that will help ensure that the work groups really have activities and objectives that carry out those overall goals as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Brings me back to my original question, and that is, well, not a question, but if I hear you correctly, Bob, and this was kind of the direction I was going in, if we were to develop a statement which articulates what the policy that I think Carl's right, I think we have a policy, but we don't have a statement that we've all agreed to that articulates that. And if we did, that would be the next, I think that would be a good place to start our future consideration for that. Am I on track here, or does this make sense?
If you're asking me, I would say it makes absolute sense. But I think I'd like to hear more from your committee.
Anybody want to volunteer to be first? Should I volunteer somebody? Jim Zons, how about you? Do you have some sentiments you'd like to express?
Why does everybody want to volunteer me first at these meetings? I just don't get it.
I want to see your lips move.
I don't know. I'm trying to still get my handle around how to kind of approach this. And like Carl brought up with the CJCC, what is already being done on that front. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I don't know how we get to that point but having some sort of mission statement or a planning outline would be the way to start.
Thank you, Jim. Mike?
Well, I guess it seems, I'm not sure where exactly we're going with it, like with the broadband and the legislative policy. We do a lot of that now. So I'm not sure what we're trying to change or go more in depth on. I'm not quite getting my head wrapped around it, as Jim was talking about.
I agree with you, Mike, and that's kind of the way I thought of it too. I think we do have a broadband policy. I think we do have a legislative policy. I think we do have a criminal justice policy. What we don't have are formal statements of exactly what that policy is. And in my opinion, at least, that might be a good place to start. Let's see if we can write a statement or two that articulates what the policy is, because I think we have those policies.
I believe so too. Just on the work that you've done and the focus that you guys have had. I mean, you stayed very focused and task driven. And I think that I agree that what's missing is just the policy that someone else could read that came onto this committee. Say, oh, this is what we're supposed. This is the direction that we're moving on with CJCC, rather than having to just learn it by osmosis. And so I think that statement is critical.
And I think that's what Sarah was saying as well. CJCC has a mission statement. They have a structure that, if described in a statement, I think would outline what this policy is. So maybe it makes sense to ask Sarah and myself and anybody else that's interested to take what already exists in CJCC and see if we can translate that into a statement that says this is the policy on criminal justice in Dunn County. And bring that to the committee, and then we could go from there. I'd entertain any reaction to that idea.
That makes sense to me.
I do, and I think most people work better when we have something concrete to begin with. You can always reject it and start over, but right now we're a little bit up in the air as to what we're doing. But frankly, when we looked at this in executive committee, one of the things that occurred to me was exactly this. We have these policies. If you ask me what they were, I might be able to describe it to my own satisfaction, but not everyone might agree with me, and it might not be a very comprehensive statement. So maybe that's where we start. So that would be my suggestion. And if Sarah is willing and Bob is willing, I think, and anybody else that would like to join us, I think just looking at what CJCC has now, putting together a statement saying this is the policy for Dunn County, bringing that back to the committee, that gives us something to work on.
I'd be happy to do that.
Great, Mike.
And I'm a resource for you guys, so I'm already all in. So
super. And Mike, I just saw him volunteer.
Is our committee just working on the one initiative?
That specifically, that would be logically our responsibility. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine.
Go ahead, Mr.
Oh,
Tripp.
CRNT is going to, I would guess, do the broadband. Legislative policy is probably the executive committee. That's the legislative committee.
Yeah.
Public outreach and information. I don't know where that would come in, Bob. That's your
Probably
problem.
admin, maybe.
Yeah.
You know.
But to answer your question briefly, Mike, yes, yeah. We're just going to take a look at that one section. It would make sense that we develop that.
But it doesn't mean that you guys, you know, a lot of people work on several committees, and so you may be cross-dressing with several 10 of these things, and they're working on them. But when you're at this committee, that's the one, at least, that speaks to me, that says this is what this is the initiative that this committee brought forward and wants to have a policy on, and so that's the one that we want to work on, and then we could remove that once you guys are happy with that you have developed that policy, and then you get to, you know, and I would like to give the committee the entire committee some homework, if I could, Mr. Tripp.
Go ahead.
So you know, we talked. I showed you, you know, the 10 pieces that were originally brought up. You know, and you know, this list came about because of circumstances that were important at the time that this discussion was happening. Some of those discussions are still valid. Some of them probably aren't. So, you know, what I'd like your group to do is to kind of at least review the 10, and you guys know, you know, what's happening in your committee. You guys know where you want to go. Is there something that is judiciary and law related that you think needs to have a discussion, so that we could talk about it as a group, and then come up with some sort of a descriptor of what that is, so we could put that on the list for future things. So the homework would be to kind of understand, you know, the work that your committee does, and it's pretty broad. I mean, it's not just CJCC. I mean, the work you guys do is pretty broad. Is there something in there of the work that you guys do that you think is more than just criminal justice that needs to be talked about with the committee, and then we could figure out what that means or where to go with it. So I don't know if I'm real clear as to maybe what the homework assignment was, but I would like you guys to look at your committee and say, what about this? Where do we go from here on this? And so that we could continue the work on the plan here. Does that kind of make any sense at all?
I'm going to ask Katie to put directional plan on the agenda for next month. And my intention at that time will be to take a look at these 10 items and have a discussion about their relevance, pertinence, how they relate to Judiciary and Law Committee, recommendations perhaps for adding to, deleting, and if I think that's your intent, right, Bob? That
It is.
because I think that we can profitably do that.
Yeah, just to keep your
Mike?
committee engaged.
Right, Mike, go ahead.
So I actually have an interest in number 9, which I don't know that it necessarily applies to this committee, but I don't know that it applies to any committee in general. But I actually have some real interest in that topic.
And I think, Bob, I'm going to put words in your mouth maybe
Great.
here. I think that's what you intended us to discuss, how this fits, because none of these things are necessarily exclusive to one committee or another. It's logical that certain committees take a lead in some areas, but Mike, I agree with you that educating and communicating between and among board members and the public is a significant factor and a significant issue. And it's certainly something we can talk about in our committee.
So Mike Rogers, do you think that is different than the outreach and information policy that is there, or is it in addition to, or?
From my perspective, I feel that the committee or that the supervisors are not involved don't have the opportunity to be involved in more than just their specific committee. We're not allowed to speak at other committees. We're not allowed to attend committees on the Zoom meetings. So I just question why the supervisors are really limited to giving input outside of their committee. And I think that we could have a lot more input from the supervisors, even at budget time when it's mostly the executive committee that does it, where years ago it was more the entire county board was involved, where now it's just kind of the executive committee that's involved in the budget decisions. So, and we're not really allowed to speak at those committees or the executive committee. So we have very limited input on budget issues compared to what they did years ago. And I feel that I have an issue with that. I don't think that's right. But that kind of flows over into the other issues at different committees where we may want to be able to give some input, or maybe they don't want us to. I'm not sure, but for me, it's a subject that I think I would be welcoming to look more into.
I agree with the thing is there a way for increased engagement of all supervisors? And so Mike, you've taken that and said, yeah, there should be a way. And these are some of the things that interest you. I think you need to get them down into writing, and then we could discuss those amongst your committee. And then we could, that could get moved up the ladder to admin or executive in terms of staff reports, or report come from this committee about the directional plan. But I think those are the kind of discussions that I think that you want to have at the committee level, because I don't think it's going to make much sense if you just raise your hand at the county board and just blurt that out. But I think it makes a lot more sense if it's coming through the committee up the chain, and that the committee is behind it, and has a part of the, if you want to hang it on the directional plan discussion. But I don't really know how to do number 9 in its entirety. But certainly what you spoke about is one component that interests you, and so I'm guessing that all 29 supervisors may have a much different viewpoint of that. But it is something that was in the plan that says, is there a way for increased engagement of all supervisors? Boy, that's a big nut to crack. But I think you've started that, at least at this level.
Any other comments at this point? Then if I'm correct.
Well, Carl's got his hand up, Mr. Chair.
Carl, you got to say something. I can only see about 3 pictures at a time.
Okay.
There you go. Go ahead.
It seems to me it's a good time in this overall plan to ask ourselves, are there other particular issues now that we might want to bring to our various committees and the departments within the committees? For instance, global climate change related to environmental policy. Look at the mess Texas is going through. I think they're wishing right now they had looked a little more carefully at what they might face with global climate change, and they've done a few things to be ready for it. Within our committee, beyond emergency management, I'm not sure that that it's a big issue. But another related, or not necessarily related, issue is cybercrime, cyber warfare, hacking. We're all very much online, and I think, for instance, a lot of our county, our electrical grid, I don't know what its exposure is to cybercrime, but I think our community is not particularly well prepared for instance, an extended power outage. I don't know that our grocery stores and gas stations have enough backup generation. So that's just to illustrate the kind of things we might talk through when we recognize, as people who read newspapers, that we're facing some broader issues that we may not be ready for, and our committees may be good places to talk about how our departments are or are not ready for them.
And I think that's, it struck me as you were talking, Carl, that the list of 10 items that are up on the screen now are things that were deemed important in 2000, what year was that, Bob, when we
I think
started?
it might have been 15 or 16. So
15 or 16?
Yeah.
And times change, things change. When I looked at this immediately, one of the thoughts that occurred to me is, I don't see anything in here about emergency government. And that was huge this year. So and I guess that's the reason for doing what we're doing with this, and that is revisit this plan, trying to be proactive rather than reactive. So again, I'm going to see if I can restate this and then move along. We've got another meeting tonight a little later. But next month, what I think we're going to do is this will be on the agenda. We will take a look at these 10 items. We will look at those things that we'd like to see either expanded or deleted or added. We'll look at how these things relate, not just to our committee specifically, but to a broader context. Mike's comments, I think, about being engaged in other committees' activities frankly, that was one of the things that drove this 5 or 6 years ago. There was a feeling that it just wasn't very successful. We've got the plan now, and I guess it's no more successful now than it was then. So maybe we need to do something different. So we'll take that up. At the same time, I think sometime between now and then, Sarah and I will we'll put our heads together and see if we can begin to develop at least a basic policy statement regarding criminal justice policy. So we'll have that to take a look at as well. Bob brought up one other thing that kind of struck me, and that's that might not be a bad idea to schedule a regular review of the directional plan and the components of it. And we can talk about this more later, but I'd like you to think about our meeting in December very often is canceled for any number of reasons. But that might be a logical time at the end of a year to kind of take a look back and take a look forward. Budget is all finished by then. We don't have other pressing business. And a meeting devoted to the directional plan in December, at least the way I'm thinking about it now, might be an appropriate time to do that. So you can be thinking about that, and we'll have a chance to talk about these things next month. I'm going to move on, but before I do, Bob, any parting thoughts? We've got some homework to think about here, and any parting shots for us?
Well, only to thank you for letting me talk to the group, and if you or any of the group have questions, contact me. I mean, I'm a resource, and I'll do what I can to help you. So that's probably pretty much what I want to do. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, how I'm going to be involved in developing your statement, but however you sense things to me or keep me in the loop, I guess that'll kind of flesh itself out as we move along.
Sure will.
Okay. With that, thank you very much. And if there's nothing else for me, I'm going to check out of the meeting.
Before you do, anybody have any last questions or comments for Bob? Don't see any. Thank you, Bob. We'll be in touch.
All right. Good discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 7B. Requests from the Sheriff's Department. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Sheriff, do you want to get, or Marshall? Where'd the sheriff go? Oh yeah, he's doing. Go ahead, guys. Either one of you or both.
Yeah, a request to toss out the existing list. It was just so we can move on with the hiring process. As I mentioned before, the one person that was not hired that applied last time, and that's kind of a trend we have. The last time we did a hiring process, we had two applicants. Hired one of those, and the person that was not hired is welcome to apply again. And but we just need to move on with an additional list and hopefully gather more applicants.
So if I hear you correctly, throwing out the old list would have a possible impact on just one individual?
Correct.
Does anybody have any? Well, let's get a motion to move this forward, and then we can talk about it. Carl, did I see your hand up?
Yeah. Is the person who was?
Well, let's get the motion first, and then we can talk about it.
Jim's on seconds.
Carl, did you move?
Well, I can move that we throw out the old list.
Okay, and Jim's on seconds, and Mike's a third there if you need one. All right, go ahead, Carl.
I'm just curious whether the person who was previously on the list is automatically informed that he or she is eligible for applying to this round.
They're not notified that they're eligible to reapply. How basically they're put on an eligibility list. If they're not hired, they're not hired. There's no promises made, and there's no obligation for me to hire off that list. Worst case scenario, if you decided not to toss out this list, I would have to wait until it expired, which is 2 years total from the date the list was established. but that would make me short, and we wouldn't be able to move on with a hiring process until that happened. So they're not automatically notified to reapply.
If I were the one on the list, I think I would be assuming I was still eligible if a job opened up or, still active. I guess I would like to be told that, no, if you want to be considered, you need to apply again at this point.
Sure.
Other questions, comments? We have a motion on the floor to toss out the old eligibility list for the sheriff's department. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we have some carry forwards from emergency communication, the courts and the sheriff. Keith, do you want to start us out, or does one of the departments want to? You've got material in your packets regarding all of them, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct,
Yeah.
Mr. Tripp. I'll just kick it off.
Go
This
ahead.
is more or less packaged together for the requests that have been submitted by 3 of the reporting departments, and they can answer any questions you have. I believe the narratives they put in here are very self-explanatory as to what the requests are. This is the normal annual process for projects that weren't completed the prior year that were budgeted, and it gives the opportunity to have the county board ultimately receive a recommendation from standing committees on these projects. And it's part of the year-end closing process to get the authorization to move the funding forward. So, and with that, I'd turn it over to any of the departments with requests to hit any highlights they wish to.
Before we go to departments, I'm going to ask the committee if you'd like to consider all 3 of these together in one motion, or if you'd like to separate them out and talk about them individually. That question can be answered by a motion to do one or the other.
I move to address them together.
In other words, you move to recommend the budget carry forward requests from the 3 departments listed on the agenda.
Yes.
That's what I thought you said that. Mike moves.
Jim's on seconds.
Jim's on seconds. You did get I thought they were pretty, and it's not the first time we've seen it, but I thought the narratives were pretty successful. So if anybody has questions of any of the 3 departments, 3, right? Yeah. Anybody have any questions of any of the departments regarding those budget carry forwards? As Mr. Strice said, this is a pretty standard procedure this time of year. Always in February, Keith, I think,
Correct,
right?
for standing committees, correct. It goes to the county board in March as part of the annual process.
Once the last year's budget is completed, yeah.
Correct.
Comments, questions, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to recommend the carry forward request, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. That was easy enough. We don't have any resolutions or ordinance changes for the county board. Anybody have any announcements? No announcements. That's good as well. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 22nd at 4:30 in the afternoon. Don't see any complaints about that. Then, having no other business to transact at this meeting, I declare the meeting. Oh, I forgot to announce it at the beginning. For our thousands of loyal viewers, this has been a meeting of the Judiciary and Law Committee, Standing Committee of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors, in case you hadn't noticed. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks. See many of you in an hour.